All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Here's our next session. For this session, we're going to be talking about patron services, and we'll kind of go through what that's going to look like throughout our training today. Once again, the instructors today are going to be me, William Lugene, and then Luke Patterson. We're the assistant administrators at Buckles. So if you have any questions about anything, you can always ask us or shoot us an email, and we'll be able to help you out as much as we can. Margaret is also here. She's our special projects librarian, is also the project manager for the move to South Orange. So if you guys have any questions about anything in terms of the move, you can also ask her as well. So like we said, it's patron services, which is going to be our session today. And for our key learning objectives, we're just going to go over patron registration, online registration for patrons, what the patron record is, and any updates that you can make for patron records, record sets for patrons, and then also Jersey Cat cards as well. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go into Leap Test, and we're going to do the same thing that we've done before, which is just log into our little practice kind of credentials that we have here. So SORA circ. There we go. Set this to SORA circ 2. This is our test server. And before we really get started and going into how everything works, we're just going to talk about a few policies that are going to be related to a lot of the things that we do today when it comes to patron services. So I'm going to just talk about the first two that we have here. So if I go back here, we're going to go into the registration policy. And there's three key points that we're going to kind of highlight today when it comes to this policy. If we go ahead and scroll down to the library card section of the policy, it's going to explain a few key important things about library cards. So first off, each patron should have their own library card when it comes to being able to have access to your library and its resources. Each patron record also must have a name, their address, their telephone number, and a barcode attached to it and assigned to it in order for us to make sure that we have all their information on file. If we scroll later or farther down, there's another section for expiration of privileges. So this is important to note. Residents that are of your library usually expire within 3 years. And then if there's a courtesy patron or library staff cards, they're going to only be valid for 1 year. So think of it as cards that are non-resident. So that also goes for pay cards and rebel cards as well. They're always going to expire in 1 year versus resident cards, which will expire in 3. And then lastly, if we scroll down a little bit more, there's a section for uniform manner of entry. This is a standard that we set across the consortium so that everybody's kind of using the same practice when creating patron records. So just keep this in mind. It states in here that all names and addresses have to be in capital letters. Middle names are optional when you're inputting that information for the patron. You can ask them if they have a preferred name, and we'll kind of go into a little bit how you can enter that into the patron record. You can also add free text blocks to courtesy, institution, and pay patrons. That way you can allow other staff members to know that these patrons are only allowed to have resources and abilities to use what's at South Orange compared to every other library within the consortium. So for example, you can type in SORA use only on that patron.
It's policy too, not you can, you should.
Sorry, you should. And then lastly, we have just making sure that you're following this, the specified entry structure for different patron codes as well. So based on the patron code for that patron, you want to just follow along and make sure that everything is entered correctly into that patron record based on the patron code. Next up, we have the residency policy as well. So this is essentially what's going to define what is a resident patron and what's a non-resident patron. In this first section, we have the standard card requirements. First off, we're going to talk about how library cards are issued by the library where the patron resides or owns property. If a patron owns property in one town and resides in another, they're only entitled to one card. So in this case, you want to always make sure you're giving your resident cards to any patrons that live within South Orange and have property there. Next up, you have children whose parents share custody in 2 Buckles towns are eligible for a card in each town if their parents will both sign for it. So that's kind of a rare case in a sense where if the child has, let's say, for example, a parent in South Orange and then a parent in West Orange, they could have access to those 2 cards if the parents kind of sign for it. And lastly, library staff cards are issued at the discretion of the employing library. So if there's anybody here that doesn't live at any of the Buckles towns, but since you work here, you'll be allowed to get a library staff card in that way. And that's based on kind of what your discretion is based on how you want to give out those cards. Next up, we have the restricted cards requirement. So I'm just going to scroll down, and here's this section. So this goes into those non-resident cards. Courtesy cards are for patrons who work or go to school in a Buckles town and only grant use of that library with no access to Buckles e-content. So that's really important. If you have any students maybe that go to Seton Hall, for example, that's kind of an option where you can have that card be available to them. Next up, you have Rebel cards, which are defined as courtesy cards. Again, that's for patrons maybe that don't live that live outside of any of the towns within the Buckles consortium. You can give them those. Pay cards are restricted to on-site use at the issuing library and have no access to Buckles e-content. So again, they only have access to your resources. Institution cards are for local institutions. So any schools, any senior centers, and libraries outside of Buckles. These are created for any ILL checkouts, so interlibrary loan checkouts. They're restricted to on-site use and have no access to Buckles e-content as well.
Some of them are for ILL checkouts, not all. It's local institutions or libraries outside Buckles for ILL checkouts.
Gotcha.
2 separate things. And the Rebel cards, you just have to make sure they're participating in Rebel. It's not, of course, just for any libraries.
Yeah.
There is a list of libraries who participate in Rebel.
Mm-hmm. With all of that being said, we're going to go back into Leap Test and we're going to do a few things now. So we're going to create a new patron. So in previous sessions, we told you guys that creating a new patron can be done by either pressing this new patron button or by going to the new drop-down menu and then clicking patron record. For this case, we're going to click the new patron button. And what that does essentially is it brings us to this empty kind of form where we can fill out all the information for that patron. For our kind of example today, we're going to make a patron called Sally South Orange. And with this in mind, you're going to start to create them by putting in a specific barcode. You're going to have essentially barcodes that haven't been assigned to patrons yet, and you just want to assign that new barcode to the patron when you're creating a record for them. So in this case, we're going to go into the barcode field here, and then I'm just going to scan in my blank barcode, and it inputs all that information there. As we go through the fields, I kind of explain how they were going to work. You'll notice here as well that there's a little asterisk here. If there's an asterisk near that field or next to the name of that field, that means that it's required that you have to fill that field out. So in this case, we're going to be making this patron for South Orange. So next up, we're going to go to the registered at field. This is a drop-down menu that shows all of the libraries that are available. And you're just going to go ahead and select the library that they're going to be registered at, which is South Orange. It's always important to know as well when you're registering a patron, especially considering the fact that you guys may have a branch later on. It's important to always register them to the main library, just to make sure that they're all under one library in that case. And so next up, we're going to talk about the patron codes. Patron code is a really important field. This is how you define and kind of show what that type of patron is. So just to give you an example, this is a drop-down menu of all of them. The patron codes that are unrestricted are the adult patron code, the juvenile patron code, and then the young adult patron code. So that's the code you're going to use for any residents that are coming to your library. And these are the most common. So you want to make sure that you use that in terms of how you would do it. They essentially work the same way. The only reason why you would want to do that is if you want it for reporting purposes based on what type of patron it is. So if it's an adult, if it's a child, you would put juvenile. Young adult is used by some libraries for patrons that are 13 and above usually. So that's a really cool thing that you can utilize as well in that case. Next up, we have courtesy. So like we mentioned before in the policy, This is used for patrons that work or go to school within South Orange in this case. And based on a next field we're going to talk about, you would have to change their expiration date to 1 year. After you add them as a courtesy patron, I'll show a field in a little bit that'll kind of show you how you can add their work or school address during the registration as well. Next up, we have the pay patron. So this is an option that you can use if staff or if patrons want to pay to have access to your resources. And it's used for mainly patrons that live outside of any of the Buckles towns. Similar to courtesy, you're going to set their expiration date to 1 year. Next up, you have Rebel. So like Margaret was mentioning before, if there's towns that are included in the Rebel program and a patron wants to have a Rebel card at South Orange, they can use that as well. So just keep that in mind if that's the case. When you're setting a patron to Rebel, so let's say if we do it for this one, you just want to go to the registered at section and set it to be at the Buckles non-Buckles cooperation branch. That's how we define the Rebel patrons within the consortium. And you also have to change the expiration date to be 1 year. So let me...
No. Date automatically
Oh, it automatically defaults.
It automatically updates when you put that non-Buckles cooperation branch in.
Gotcha.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
The only thing is Rebel, though, is a calendar year, which expires every December 31st, as opposed to the other cards, which are 1 year from the date of issuance. I don't know if that's...
Interesting, because it's policy for courtesy cards, and the policy also states Rebel cards are considered courtesy cards. That would be a change in policy if we did it that way.
That's why no the library brought that up. It's interesting.
Yeah, nobody's brought that up.
No.
Maybe you'll be the first library to bring this to our Policies and Procedures Committee.
If we have to change it manually, we will.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, that should be something that's brought up to the committee. If that is indeed the way it's supposed to work, and that's like part of the Rebel agreement, then our policies should reflect that. So we may need to change our policy. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to change this back to South Orange. And you'll notice as well, too, that the expiration date changed now. Next up, you have institution. So institution, like we were mentioning before, can be used for schools and nursing homes, but it also can be used for your Jersey Cat libraries as well. So these are libraries that are outside of Buckles, and they are part of the Jersey Cat program. When it comes to creating any of these Jersey Cat accounts, the Buckles office will be able to create those accounts for you. So you would just let us know that you're trying to create a Jersey Cat account for a library that's not already in our system, and we'll create it for you so that you can utilize it. Next up is the Buckles Library patron code. That's the code that you can use to kind of create library cards for the library. So if you want a South Orange, let's say, YA department library card, you can use that patron code to define that. And that kind of gives you access to a lot more things compared to the other patron codes, considering the fact that it's an actual library card account.
Yeah, I think it has like 100 checkouts, and you're allowed to have 4 overdues and fines, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I have a story time card, that I'm doing, so I can use that as any kind of programming.
And then lastly, you have library staff. So this is what I was mentioning before. If any of you guys don't live within a Buckles library, but you want to have your own card for specifically South Orange, you can utilize that. That gives you full access to the library that you work for, so in this case, South Orange. And you would have to just make sure that you add the work address first and then the home address, which, again, I'll kind of go into in a little bit how to do that.
And you can have examples where a library has staff who do have Buckles cards. Like I have a staff card for one of the libraries I work at, but I do also have a Buckles card because I specifically wanted Hoopla access for that library. So you can actually have sometimes a Buckles library card and a staff card as well. But what you wouldn't do is if you already have a South Orange card, you wouldn't mark it library staff because you live in South Orange. If you live in South Orange, you would just get an adult library card for South Orange. But if you were in another town or completely outside Buckles for sure, you would get a library staff card.
Does that give access to the content?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Library?
why
Mhm.
it's at the discretion of the library. But that's why for that example with Hoopla, I got it for the library I work at part-time because I wanted specifically to access the Hoopla content, and I can't with my other town's library card.
So just to move on a little bit, so these two fields are date of registration and expiration date. You'll notice date of registration automatically sets it for the day that you're creating that patron record. So today's September 25th, 2023. And then, like we were mentioning before, based on the patron code and the registered at, it can change the expiration date. In some cases, you may have to do that manually. If you notice that there's a patron code that needs to have 1 year of expiration, you would change that there. In order to do that, you can go ahead and click into this, and it brings it up a calendar widget in which you can change that. It'll actually go into in a little bit how you can be able to do that from other means, but that's how you would change it from there. You have this birth date field as well. This is not required, but if you want to add a birth date to kind of define what your patron is, so like if it's a juvenile, you can add that as well for your purposes. It's all up to the discretion of the library, though. And then next up, we have the statistical class. The statistical class is important for, again, reporting purposes. You just want to set the statistical class to where the patron lives. So in this case, if we're making an adult patron that lives in South Orange, you're going to go ahead and click the drop-down menu, and it's going to show up with a bunch of different towns all throughout New Jersey. You just want to scroll down, in this case, to Essex, and then click Essex-South Orange, and that assigns it to the statistical class. This is a required field just, again, for making sure that we have that on file for the patron. And then next up, you have the differences between name versus preferred name. So you'll notice here on the left, there's a few different fields. When you type in last name, first name here, these are required fields. And this is essentially what's going to act as the preferred name. So let's say a patron prefers to be called by a nickname. They can allow that information to be kind of put in there. So for now, we're going to type in Sally South Orange.
In all caps.
Yes, that's based, I keep forgetting this, but that's based on uniform manner of entry. So we're going to type that in, and this is going to be Sally's preferred name. Now, if you notice, if we go scroll down here, there's name on identification. You want to think of this as Sally's legal name. This is the name that's going to show up on a person's license or their passport, if they're utilizing that to kind of confirm that they are who they are. So this is a really important thing that you can use. Again, you want to make sure you just ask the patron if that's something that they want to have on file. Let's use this for example. Let's say Sally's real name on her identification is Sallington, South Orange. So we can go ahead and type that, and you'll notice here that this blue check mark shows up. You can use the name on identification for their print and telephone notices if that's applicable for them. You can also check that off, and then it won't use it, and it'll use their preferred name. So that's just based on the patron's discretion, and you always want to just ask them while you're creating the record for them if they want to include their legal name and if they have a preferred name or not.
And what they want to show in their notices.
Yeah.
Because that's important that, on any documentation that arrives at their house is not showing a name that they necessarily don't want broadcasted yet.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple questions.
Yep.
Unless you're going to get to this. So, if you're doing a rebel card, where the statistical class is, you have to put Essex and say orange.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay, so that answers that. I've had some experience, at least this summer, where parents are telling me that their kids identify by another pronoun. Is there an option on here to add a pronoun? Preferred pronoun?
Not 100% sure.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
I think that may have been brought up as an idea. What our software does is they accept idea requests, and then libraries vote on them, and they'll work on development for any ideas that get enough votes. So I think that might have been something that was brought up, but that didn't get enough votes yet for it to be developed. So we don't have that now, but the closest you can get to it is if their school ID had one name and they go by another name. You can put their preferred name in the top fields, and you can put their school ID name in the other fields, and they can choose which name shows up on any notices that they get sent.
So some kids don't have a school ID.
Right.
I'm trying to think about all of the ways.
Yeah.
It falls on us if we're saying, well, we don't have that option. Why don't you have that option? So we
Yeah.
just have to come up with some language.
There's a gender thing somewhere. I don't know if we display it, but I don't know if that satisfies it either. You know what I mean? Because gender is very much black and white. It's
I don't think we have it here though.
in at least in Polaris, it's very binary. It's you can admit there might be an other category, but
or like a notes field or something. I mean,
there's notes fields we'll be getting into in a little bit, but yeah, whatever you feel like the existing functionality allows for, you can use. But right now, yeah, we don't have any pronouns fields or anything like that.
All right. So next up, we have this attributes section. It's not used a lot, but this is something that you can kind of tack onto a patron record to kind of define them even further. So like if you want to define if they can't use the internet or not at your library, you can use that. And then this miscellaneous field will drop down a few different things as well if you want to define them further, like using the library staff option to define that this patron's account is for library staff.
I wouldn't use that though because we have a library staff patron code.
Yeah.
Yeah, that section is very, very much not applicable in most cases.
Yeah. So next up, we have the email address. This is kind of self-explanatory. You would apply the email address into the patron's record, and you have the alt email address if they have that. It's a little bit different. Before we had to do this in all caps, but when it comes to email addresses, you want to do them all in lowercase, and that's part of the uniform manner of entry. So we're going to do sallysouth@gmail.com. That's how you would essentially just enter it. You would make everything lowercase in this case.
this field set should be capitalized because I promised you there's going to be people who put in cards that's going to be lowercase.
You'll already see that in our database.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a
just
policy that nobody can follow. Apparently.
yeah. So yeah, you just got to do your best to like kind of keep that case when you're typing them in. Next up, you have your addresses. So this is what I was explaining before. If depending on the patron code of the patron, you may have to add in their school information, their work information to define that this is maybe a courtesy patron that lives outside of South Orange, but they work somewhere. So the address type drop-down field can be utilized in that way. You have home, work, school, which are going to be really the main ones that you utilize in this case to define what kind of address this is. But for Sally's case, she actually lives in South Orange. So we're just going to go ahead and type in her normal home address in this case. So when you type in the postal code and hit enter, it should automatically fill in these fields on the right here with the appropriate city, state, and county. So that's a little helpful if you just want to get all of that field information kind of filled out. And then you just have to put in the street address. So we're just going to type in a random one, 123 Story Book Lane. And
In all caps, right?
yes, because I keep forgetting that. And all caps, so you want to make sure you're doing that. And that's how you would be able to do that. If you want to add a particular address, then you can. So you use this plus address button, and then it brings up another form where you can add more information or add a different address. Like I was saying before, if they work in South Orange, you can use that as well. And you would probably want, if they're a courtesy patron and they work at South Orange, you would want that to probably come up first. So you can do this and then put their home address on the second option or second field here. If you don't need to use it, you can go ahead and delete it with this trash can button as well, but we're just going to leave it to home for now. I'd also ignore this little like section right here, and I'll kind of go into it a little bit once we kind of create the whole patron record. Next up, you have your phone number, and then you have fax number if patrons use that as well. They can input up to 3 phone numbers. So I'm just going to type in a random one here, but essentially this is just an option that they can utilize to kind of get notifications sent to them, which is what I'm going to actually go into now. But they can add their phone number as well for that information to be there. And then next up, we have the notification settings, which is kind of the really important aspect of creating the patron record. When you set up their notifications, this is how they're going to receive all of their overdue notifications, renewal notifications, anything like that is going to be sent based on what the settings are set up for. First off, just to explain this though, for notices address, you just want to set it to home. That's the only option that we have here. Next up, you have e-receipt option. So this is an option that the patron can set up if there's any transaction done at the circulation desk. You can set it so that it emails them. So let's say, for example, they're paying for an overdue. It'll send the receipt to them automatically through their email once the transaction is done. Next up, we have the notification option. So this is really where you're going to kind of define what type of notification they're going to get or how they're going to get it. So if we click this drop-down menu, the main ones that are usually utilized are the email address, the phone number, and then text messaging. When it comes to emails, they'll be able to get the notification sent to their email. When it's a phone number, that's kind of based on the discretion of the library, but usually libraries call the patron to let them know if something has happened. And then the last one is text messaging, which will send a text notification to them. And fax and mailing address usually aren't used as much anymore. Another really good thing that you can utilize is if a patron wants kind of 2 ways to receive a notification. In this case, for example, you can set the notification to email address and then click this additional text notice. And what that does is it sends 2 notifications, one to their email and one to their phone. What's really important if you're going to do anything with text notices is you want to pay attention to these 2 fields here. These both are set up for drop-down menus, and based on their phone number, you would want to go here and select the phone number that they want to get their notification sent to. And then the last thing, which is really important, is the wireless carrier. This is really important because the way that we send our notifications is a little bit different. Essentially what we do is when we're sending notifications to the patron's phone, we send it to their wireless carrier, and then the wireless carrier sends it back to the patron's phone. So it's really important that you select the specific wireless carrier that their phone is attached to. If you don't, and let's say, for example, Sally's phone is actually a Verizon phone, but we selected AT&T, it's not going to allow them to get the notifications that they need through text. So it's always important to make sure that you look through here and then select the appropriate wireless carrier.
And then it would be on the patron to tell us, oh, they switched carriers at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing too, if there isn't a wireless carrier that's applicable to the patron, you would also just have to let us know by sending us a ticket, and then we can add that in there as well. Next section we have is preferences. You're most likely not going to touch that, and the reason for that is because patrons are expected essentially to kind of configure their own preferences, and this can be done within the public access catalog, the PAC. So you're usually not going to touch this, and there's even certain functions where you definitely don't want to touch this, like maintain reading history. We'll go into that in a little bit, but that's a privacy concern. You don't want to really touch any of these here. And then lastly, you have the password. So this is where you can kind of type in their password so that they'll have access to the public access catalog when they're ready to use it. What we've seen from libraries is that most libraries usually just take the last 4 digits from their barcode and then they set it as their password. So in this case, it's 3775, and then we just put it in both fields to confirm it. And that's how you would essentially apply their password. Once everything is set up and everything looks okay, we can scroll up and down to make sure everything's looking good. We can go ahead and save the patron record to create it. You'll notice here that this pop-up comes up, just kind of showing you if there's any duplicate patron records. So it kind of looks through the account and tries to see if there's any numbers that or any fields that are similar to another patron. Because we use 201555 as our test number, you'll notice that shows up. So just based on your discretion, you can use this to know if it's a duplicate patron record. If it's not, then you can go ahead and hit continue. And now the patron record is created, and it opens us into the new patron record at that point. So that's how you would be able to do that and create a patron record. Now I'm going to pass it off to Luke, and he's going to explain online registration on the PAC.
All right, so online registration is a way for patrons to get instant access to e-content. And this was really useful during the pandemic, obviously, when people weren't able to get to a library or there was social distancing. They were able to go online and set up e-card and have instant access to e-content. So first I'm going to go into the policy for Buckles e-cards. So the policy states it will create a patron barcode that begins with PAC Reg, and that just stands for Public Access Catalog Registration. And it's a way for us to differentiate between e-cards and non-e-cards. So once the account is set up, there will be access to Buckles e-content for 1 month, and then they automatically expire. When a patron signs up for an e-card, email will go out to the CERC email address, so that way the library can see that there was a sign up and verify the application right away. And you do this because you want to delete invalid e-cards. And then this also is helpful because it will show someone signed up, and then you can kind of have them in mind when they come in for to exchange your e-card for a full Buckles card. So they're given that window of access for that 1 month, and then to get a full Buckles e-card, a full Buckles library card with full privileges, they'll need to come into the library and require the proof of address that Will mentioned, and then getting their physical card. One thing we do to keep the database clean is that expired cards are purged by the Buckles office after 2 months. So that's just a short-term way to get access to content. So I'm going to go through an example of updating a patron and assuming they sign up for an e-card online, and now they're coming into the library to get the full library card. Okay, so they'll come in and say, hey, I signed up online, and you're going to use the search to look them up. You can see here it says Billy Tarantino, and then his library card number starts with PAC Reg. So that's the way we know it's an e-card. So the first thing you want to do is prove the address and that they have access to a full card, whether it's driver's license, passport, another form of identification, or a utility bill. And the first thing you want to do when converting a PAC Reg card to a full Buckles card is you want to go in registration, and we do this anytime the barcode changes. So this you'll see later on in training. It could be if there's a lost card and the barcode needs to be changed. So anytime a barcode changes, you want to copy the current barcode and put that into the former barcode field. And we do this just to keep track of everything. And it's really important to keep the database clean and figure out everything that's going on. Now, there is only one former barcode field. So in the event that they had an e-card, then they got a regular barcode, they lost their card, they got another one. There's multiple barcodes. They moved from one Buckles down to another. What you do then is in the notes field, you put the third oldest barcode and so forth. So there's only one former barcode field, but in notes you can keep putting in as many barcodes as you want. So what I did right here is I put the former barcode for the PAC Reg number in the former barcode field, and then after verifying the address, what you do is you grab a card that's ready to be applied to a patron's account from the desk, and you're going to scan it into the new barcode field. Okay. So now there's some other things we have to take care of as well. After the barcode, it's very important to submit a barcode change form. And what I'll do is I'll just go into the form real quick and kind of show you what that looks like. Okay. Guys, I'm going to go on to you. So what I did is I went into Buckles Connect. Buckles Connect, as we'll have training on, is kind of employee intranet. So it's a way for us to store forms, documents, anything that the consortium staff uses is all kind of stored in this one area called Buckles Connect. So you can see down here there's the support form, and the first area of it is you kind of select the category, and then we have a category called Patron Barcode Change Form. So I'm just going to go through this and fill it out. Patron's new barcode. I'm going to go in and pull that from the one we scanned, and the patron's former barcode. And for previous library, I'm going to just keep it as South Orange because they're not changing the library. Okay, so I'm going to just do. Okay, I'm just going to put this. Just get through the form. Go to next, and any additional comments, submit. I'm not going to submit it because this is a live form, but that's how you do the barcode change form. So the reason we have the barcode change form is our iOS isn't synced on the barcode level with Overdrive and all the e-content stuff. So that's right now a manual process. We hope to one day have it be an automated process, but for now, if a barcode changes in the iOS, it's not going to update the barcode in our e-content services like Overdrive. So next up, after we do the barcode change form, there's some other things we got to take care of. So as you'll remember from what Will was talking about, patron code is so important because that's going to dictate privileges, and that's kind of where all the policies are tied to that code. So you can see here that the patron code is still online registration. So since those expire and are only a short-term card without full privileges, we now need to change this to a full card. So we're going to change it to adult. Next up, we have to change the statistical class. So when someone registers online, the statistical class comes in blank, and then we adjust it when they come in. So it's going to be Essex County, South Orange. And then the final thing we need to do is change the expiration date. And so what you'll do now is there's kind of two ways to do it. So one, we can update it manually. So I can change it here, and so if I put, it's going to also update the date of registration. So 25th, and then you can see it automatically goes to, we want it to go out 3 years. Okay, and then kind of a faster way to do it is we can save it, and we can click renew. And renew is a faster way than doing it manually because it will bring up a renew registration box, and it will show the expiration date, and then you can change it here. So That's another way to do it. You can do it either way, though. So that's about it. It's important to keep track of, and the reason we have online registration, copy of the CERC email, is that you can kind of keep track of people signing up, and they'll be kind of coming in for a full card for privileges, and it's nice to have that kind of like heads up, and just keep track of anything that needs to be purged, because a lot of people might, maybe not a lot, but people might just sign up with a without any actual like connection to Buckles, just to kind of get access to the content, and those need to be purged and deleted. So next up, Will's going to go over the patron record.
Just a quick note about the CERT email account. I did give the credentials to your director, so somebody should always be checking the CERT account for emails. We have a lot of stuff go there automatically through the Polaris database, so if nobody knows about it, somebody should go ahead and ask for the credentials and make sure that people are able to get into it.
All right. So we have a guest patron here that we're going to kind of explain what the patron record is from. This guest patron is actually Billy's brother, Bobby Tarantino. So I'm going to go ahead and just scan the barcode here. And then it'll bring us straight into Bobby's patron record. So I'm going to ignore this for now. But first up, I'm just going to kind of go through what the patron record is and all the different features and functions that it has when you're in here. So first off, you have this I button. This is similar to a lot of the other records that we've discussed before in other sessions. If you hover over it, it brings up a little field here that kind of gives pertinent information about the patron. If you go ahead and click the I as well, it'll allow it to stay. So you can be able to utilize it to kind of, again, have that always be there if you need it. And then you can just click again to make sure that the I is removed and then that info isn't there anymore. Next up is this Actions drop-down menu. If you go ahead and click that, this is a way that you can be able to add patrons to a record set, which we'll kind of go over in a little bit later in the session. But that's how you would be able to do that. You can add them to a new one or to an existing one. And then from that point, we can use these fields, these tabs here, and kind of discuss it. So if we click here, usually when you open up a patron record, it'll automatically default to this tab, which is the checkout tab. What the checkout tab is essentially just a way for us to be able to check out items to patrons when they're at the desk. So that's really important that it kind of shows up here first, because you want to make sure that your patron record is up before you check out the actual item to it, and that just gives it a little bit of an ease of use when it comes to opening up that patron record. So you would just scan in this item, and then you can also use the find tool to find items as well. I believe we're going to go into this in later sessions, but that's how you would be able to do that. Next up, you have the out/overdue. So if a patron has any items out, this will kind of define where how many they have out and how many is overdue. So let's say, for example, Bobby had Diary of a Wimpy Kid out. This 0 would turn from 0 to 1, showing that he has one item out. And if Bobby doesn't bring the item back in time and it becomes overdue, it'll also take this number up to 1 as well. So you'll notice that there's one item that's also out and overdue, it's going to both say 1 in these fields. So keep that in mind. That's a great way to kind of define and help how many items a patron has out and if it's overdue. Next up, you have account. This is where a lot of the overdues, fines, and fees will be located. As fines are accrued and fees are accrued, this number will go up based on how much the patron needs to pay. And utilizing this, we can also pay and add charges, which we'll kind of go into in a little bit as well. But that's how you'd be able to do that. Next up, we have claims and loss. So they kind of work together in a way, but just to kind of define what they are, when you have an item that's lost or when a patron loses an item, this number here will tick up showing that they've lost that item, and then a patron can make a claim against it. So let's say it says that the item was lost. They can either create a claim saying that they never had the item or that they already did return the item to your library and it's still coming up as lost. So it's almost a way to kind of dispute the aspect that they lost the item. So that's really important to kind of keep in mind.
It's not specific to loss, though. You have to be careful to distinguish. Claims are for any item that's checked out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just lost items. If you have any item out, it doesn't even need to be overdue. It could have been just checked out yesterday. If you say, I never checked that out, that's a claim, and you can claim that it was never checked out. If you say, I returned that yesterday, you can claim that it was returned.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just for lost items. It's just they decided to stick these two in one place together. They're not really associated with each other in that way.
Next up, for the next tab, we have holds and held. So the way that you would use this is if there's any holds on the patron's account, any hold requests that they have set up, the number of the hold requests will tick up. So you'll notice here that Bobby has 2 hold requests that are canceled. So therefore, he's going to have 2 hold requests here. The held thing kind of section here is important to remember as well. When an item is held, that means that it's been processed through the hold request, and then this number will take up, showing that a patron has an item that's ready to be picked up from that library. We'll kind of go more in depth on how hold requests work and how we set them up in a later session. But just to kind of remember, hold requests can be kind of looked at as any hold that's pending, and then held is like the hold request that's been fulfilled and processed and is ready for the patron to pick up. Next up, we have the reading history tab. And before I kind of go into this, we're going to go into a policy. We're going to go into the registration policy here. And there's a section that says maintain reading list feature. So I was mentioning this before when we were going through the preferences on creating a patron record. But a reading list maintain reading list is a feature that we have within the ILS where patrons can essentially have any item that they checked out be maintained in a list on their account. That can be utilized if you want to ever help out a patron find a new book or find a new item that they would like to read, and if they want to explore, you can use their reading list as a reference to kind of define and let them know what they may like. The only issue and the main thing that you want to remember when it comes to reading lists is that patrons should be the only ones that should check off and allow this feature to be accessible for them on their account. Staff members should never be able to check off for patrons to have this feature enabled on their account. And that's just based on privacy concerns. We want to make sure that patrons overall give us the access to that information rather than us making sure that they have that information on their account based on our own accord. So it's really important to remember that. But if we go back here to leak test, all of those items that they have checked out will all kind of compile and collect in this reading history list. So that's where you can be able to utilize that and kind of give them recommendations to any items if you notice they like a specific item or a specific series or genre. Next up, we have associations. So I'm going to go back to our registration policy, and we're going to go to the association section, which is right here. So the association section lists that it's not used or supported at the Buckles level. So this is mainly made for local use only at your library. And it might not be honored at another library. So it's really important to kind of keep that in mind when you're creating associations. And it's also recommended to develop a local policy for use due to the privacy concerns that can have. In this case, you can consult an attorney when it comes to creating that policy for yourselves within the library. But just to kind of explain what the association means, if I go back to here, what association means is essentially you can create associations from one patron to another patron. If I go ahead and click New Association here, we noticed before that Bobby has a brother named Billy. And what we can do from this point is we can create an association for Billy Tarantino on Bobby's account. So if I'm going to use the find tool here to just go ahead and type in their name. So let's say Bobby wants Billy to be associated with his account. You can go ahead and add them in. You can scan in their barcode or again use the find tool to be able to look for it. And you'll notice here that the associated patron is now added onto their list of associated patrons within Bobby's account. The reason why you would want to do this is because you have two options at this point. Once a patron is associated to a specific account, You can either block this patron if the patron record is blocked automatically. So this is kind of a great and helpful tool. There's situations where maybe a parent has a blocked account because they haven't paid their fines, and it's reached the point where they can't get access to materials anymore. And then they'll use their child's account instead to be able to get access to other items. So this is a great way to kind of associate those records together, so that if one record is blocked, the other record will be blocked as well. So it's a great way to kind of make sure that patrons aren't cheating the system in that way. Next up as well, we
Have that conversation.
yeah, it's a huge problem within the consortium, so I can only imagine. But next up, we have allow me to pick up holds for these patrons as well. So this is really great option too. Again, going back to that parent-child situation, if a parent is in the library and wants to pick up an item for their child that they already have a hold request for, they can be able to do that because the association is made for them. The main and important thing to remember too is if you're creating an association for any patron, you would have to do it both ways in order for it to be applicable for both patrons. So Bobby is the brother of Billy, so if I were, for example, to allow him to pick up holds, that means Bobby will be the only person that can pick up holds for Billy. We would then have to go into Billy's account and change those settings there so that he can pick up holds for Bobby, and vice versa. So it's really important just to keep that in mind. Again, that's a feature that's kind of made so that, for example, children, if you don't want the child to pick up an item or a hold for their parent, then you can kind of set that as well. But that's a really important way to think about it. And then lastly, you have this notes field to kind of further define what the association is for both patrons. And we can just type in this case, brothers, and that'll help us with understanding why this association was created. So that's a really important thing to kind of just keep in mind when it comes to doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and click add, and now the association will be made. It'll show the patron's barcode, their name, the branch that they're at, and then the note saying that they're brothers. Depending on the function that we've set up, it'll either say yes or it'll be left as blank, showing that they don't have that option enabled.
This will also work for a nanny versus an au pair. Because our policy right now is that au pairs can get library cards and work in some our family. There are some nannies who work for the families also who are also eligible for cards, but parents don't often have their cards, or parents get a card but they don't use the library, so they give the card to the nanny. And so the parent goes, oh yeah, my nanny can use the card, but the parent has never stepped foot in the library at all. They have no idea what to do or what have you. So John Smith says, yes, his nanny can use a card, but do the same thing, put the nanny's name under the note. Or do we, that's up to us, the leader, do we just enforce the policy that nannies should get library cards and not use the family's card?
Usually they get the family's note that they work for them.
Yes, it's so many different things about it. Yeah.
Well, this association associates two patrons that already exist in the database. So the nanny would have to already have a card, and then she could pick up the parent's holds, or she could be blocked if the parent's blocked, that kind of thing. But they would both have to have a card. If you're talking about somebody who doesn't have a card using somebody else's card, that would be local policy that you would set up.
Okay.
Maybe do a note of some sort in the card and say that they're allowed. Yeah.
But we don't have that clause. If people are being creative and allowing them to see things that they don't.
Everyone's creative.
I know. A little more than needed, but
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really great feature for doing that. But yeah, it's ultimately about creating a policy that'll work, especially for your use case. So I would just kind of discuss that and figure out what could be the best policy for you.
But if they just need to understand, if they go to another library, it may not be honored.
Yeah.
So if they try to pick up a hold at West Orange for somebody else, it may not be honored there because they don't have an association's policy and it's not a consortium-wide policy.
Mhm.
It just never made it to be something that we accepted as a consortium. It's local.
Yeah. All right. So the next tab we have here is the notices tab. So we actually have one here, but essentially what happens is for the patron record, if as the patron uses the record in their library card more and more, notices will start to accrue, showing all the different notices that they have available here. I'm going to go ahead and go into the overdue notices policy as well to kind of explain how that works. So if we go ahead and click into here, there's a section within it, and it kind of defines what all the overdue notices would be. So I'm just going to list off a lot of the information that's here. What's important is that overdue notices are sent by the patron's registered library via mail or email. The first notice for overdue is 14 days after the due date, and then the second notice is 28 days after the due date. Bills are 60 days after the due date. That's when the bills are going to start to be applied on the patron's account. And email overdues are sent every single day based on our system that we have on the back end. We kind of send email overdues to patrons each day after, I believe, I want to say 10. Bills are only sent in print via mail as well, so that's something that's really important to kind of remember. So based on our systems, on Wednesdays, I believe, we send overdues and billings to every library, and from that point, you would have to print out the particular bills for those patrons and then send it out to them in print via mail. So that's a really important thing to remember. As time goes on, you kind of get used to it a little bit, but that's a really important way, and another reason for why you should look at your SORA CERC email accounts in order to receive that information.
Not just bills though, the mailed overdues as well.
Yeah.
There's some library, some patrons who have mail selected as their notification option, so they'll get mailed overdues.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another important thing to remember as well. They'll get overdues and bills every Wednesday. We try our best to get it sent out early in the morning. Depending on the circumstance, it may come out later, but just remember to keep checking out your email on Wednesday to make sure you get those notifications. Yep.
Question, I don't know if it's for the cards that are online, like the e-cards,
Mhm.
do they get billed the same way? Can someone even get a fine on an e-card? I know we were talking about how if someone gets an e-card and they get an in-person one, their accounts keep changing. What is the situation?
So I think with e-cards, the content's just digitally revoked after the borrowing limit. So if they're just having an e-card, there's never going to be any fines really.
Really, the idea is that they shouldn't be able to use their online card physically because they don't have a card number to use. If you go to the desk and you try to check out physical items, you're not going to have a card to present. So the idea is they wouldn't be able to check out items. I think I've seen it where they have, and I really don't know how they've circumvented that and done it. But there are some online cards that I haven't been able to delete in my monthly purges because they have checkouts and fines and stuff, and I don't know how it's happened. So ideally, they shouldn't be checking anything out. They should be getting their physical card first, and then they can do checkouts. But I don't know if some of these people are, they're getting their card number in their email, and they're, I don't know, entering it on their phone somehow, so that they're scanning it in their phone. I don't know.
Yeah.
And somehow doing checkouts that way. If they do have overdues like that, yeah, they would get sent overdue notices just like anybody else. But yeah,
Would it affect their eligibility to get a regular library card?
Fines wouldn't if they're under $10 for a regular standard card. They could get a card. They don't have to clear their fines first. There's no policy that says that. But if it's over $10, they'd be blocked, and you wouldn't. I normally give them card until they cleared it. We got it under $10 again. Yeah, but you shouldn't see that. Hopefully, you shouldn't see that happening a lot with online cards.
All right, so I'm going to go back to leave test, and just to give you guys a better example of how notices are going to look here, if I scan this barcode, I believe this should be, yeah, Margaret's main barcode or library card.
You did double-sided, didn't you?
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. No problem.
Here, do you want mine? Oh, you
Got it. There we go. So here's Margaret's account, and from here we can go into the notices tab, and you'll notice that there's a lot more information here. Some notices can be consolidated as well. So if I go ahead and click into Monarchy, for example, it shows all of the different notices that are sent for that particular title. So in this case, it sent her an overdue notice on August 1st, then another one the 15th, and then another one the 29th. And so that's how you can be able to look at that. And you'll have all that information there. You'll notice here too, the status says email completed. That's something important to keep in mind. A lot of patrons may come in and say that they didn't receive a notification for that. If the status is email completed, that kind of just notes or tells you that the email was sent out based on what the system is saying. And so with that being said, if they're not receiving the email and they're still kind of trying to figure out where it is, you can also send us a support ticket, because we have our own internal delivery system where we can be able to check if the notification was properly sent. But in terms of how you can be able to view that, that would be a great way to kind of view that with this notification tab. You can also go to the item record as well, and it will bring you straight to the item record that the notification was sent out for. All right.
I'll make one more comment about overdues. For the print overdues that you guys will be emailed every Wednesday, there are specific envelope types that work when sending them out, that have the window in the exact right place. When you fold the notice, it like lines up perfectly. You can ask us for that exact type of envelope if you don't find one of your own that works properly. So yeah, just fold it up and try sticking it in different envelopes. If you don't really mind and you want to write in the address yourself, or I don't know, go for it. But no, we do have a specific envelope tech we can send you the specific details about that will work for those overdue notices.
All right. So for the next tab, you'll notice we have messages. We don't use this anymore, so I wouldn't even worry about going into this one. But the next one that's really important is this blocks tab. So I'm going to kind of go into it a little bit with PNP as well, based on the policies. So I'm going to go to the patron status policy here. And if we go to the blocked section, it kind of gives some information on how blocks work on a patron record. So first off, you have your automatic blocks, and automatic blocks can be applied based on a few different criteria. So if there's more than $10 on an unrestricted card, or more than $5 on an unrestricted card, it creates an automatic block on that patron record. If the patron has 10 or more items overdue as well, that also creates an automatic block. And then lastly, if a status of long overdue is applied to an account, that's based on if a patron doesn't return the item within 45 or after 45 days, then it'll also block that account automatically as well. So that's really important to keep in mind why these automatic blocks are applied to a patron's account. We're going to also go to the registration policy here. And if we scroll down to patron notes, this also explains another policy where only the home library is allowed to add notes to a patron's account. This again goes into the perspective of, since there's multiple libraries, we want to make sure that library staff members are dealing with specifically their patrons if they want to apply notes to them. So that's really important to keep in mind. And in terms of adding blocks, I'm going to go back into here and kind of show that. But when you're adding a block, this is kind of the manual way of doing it. and there's two different ways that blocks can be added. You either have a library assigned block, which is essentially a preset one, and then you have your free text block. So if I click add block here, you'll notice that these are your two options. So library assigned is based on a drop-down menu that kind of gives you some options on how you want to block that account. So you can utilize that in a more manual way. And then you also have your free text block, which is where you can freely type in specifically what you want about the patron. And from there, it'll apply that block to the account. So that's really important to keep in mind when it comes to doing that. Next up, we have the Notes tab, and it kind of shows something similar to what I just explained before. You have your non-blocking notes and your blocking notes. Non-blocking notes is a field where you can apply a certain note for a particular patron. Like Luke said before, if you have former barcodes, for example, that has started to get more and more because the patron's moving to a different library, this is where you would put that information in. And the reason why is because it's not going to block the patron. However, you also have blocking notes. This does block the patron, but it's not as helpful. It's a little redundant to use this considering the fact that you have free text blocks. So I would recommend using, or we all recommend using free text blocks over the blocking note. Another issue that kind of pops up is that if you type in the blocking note, instead of clearly stating what the patron is blocked for, it's just going to say patron has notes, and then it's going to direct you to go into the notes to see that. So that's why a free text block is a little bit easier to kind of define and tell you right then and there that this is the reason why the patron is blocked. And lastly, for the last tab, we have record sets. And with the record sets tab, this is a really important thing to remember as well. If there's any record set that a patron is part of, it's going to show up here. When you're using record sets, that can be used for any book clubs, or if there's students that have projects and they want to be grouped together in a record set, you can utilize that as well. And that's how you can be able to figure out if they're part of anything. So it'll be really helpful, for example, if you're trying to figure out if a particular patron is a member of a book club, you would go to this tab to look for that. But that's how you would essentially do that. And that's essentially everything when it comes to the patron record. I'm going to pass it off to Luke now, and now he's going to discuss doing patron updates on the record.
You guys want to do a break?
Yeah.
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 Sure.
All right. Yeah, it's 11:22, around 11:27. I guess we'll come back.
get started.
All right.